In layman's terms, then, what are the legal issues being disputed here?
Three legal issues in this case. The first is this a constitutional revision or an amendment? Because there's different standards as to how to change the Constitution. The second is Proposition 8 a revocation of the separation of powers between the judicial branch and the legislative branch, in this case, through the initiative process. And the third is what happens to the marriages that took place between the time of the Supreme Court decision here in California in May and the passage of this initiative in November.
Just how significant is what is going on at present?
Well, I imagine it's overwhelmingly significant to the people that it affects. We're talking about a question of equal protection under the law, and the people who are same-sex individuals that have either been married or seek to be married feel like they're being treated separately from the rest of the citizenry. So for them, of course, it's a fundamental issue.
What are the bigger national implications here? Because as we've just shown our viewers, the map of the states isn't full of colour, as it were. We're looking at only a number of states across the country that have even civil unions or lesser rules than that. What are we talking about here? Talk to me about what happens, you know, according to what happens in federal court this time.
Well, a couple of things that are national implications. The first is when California, between May and November, had the right for same-sex couples to marry, couples from outside the state came into California and got married and then went back to Iowa or Nebraska or wherever they went. There's a constitutional issue regarding full faith and credit of laws from other states, and so that's a pending issue that's going to end up probably in the federal courts. The second is, if some states allow same-sex marriage and some don't, there will be litigation to get a uniform point of view, and eventually I think this story is going to end up in the Supreme Court of the United States, although right now we're dealing with the California Supreme Court.
Yeah, well, how does this split, sort of Democrats versus Republicans at this point? It was interesting to look at the vote on election night. Something like 70% blacks in favour of Prop 8, which effectively kills same-sex marriages, whereas whites were very much closer. How does it work on a sort of partisan basis?
Interesting question. I don't think it's as much a party line issue as it is a religious issue, because those people who are devoutly Catholic, devoutly Mormon tended to come out and vote against same-sex marriage for Proposition 8. Those people who weren't quite as devout, I suppose you could say, or who were more civil libertarians, voted against it. And so you didn't have a clear demarcation between Republicans and Democrats on this question. And I think that's going to be what we see in the future, that there are people on both sides of the aisle when it comes to political parties who have differing views about same-sex marriage.
Because that'll matter if it gets to the Supreme Court, of course. Last question to you. Why is this going to court at all if the majority of California voted for it?
That's a very good question, and the reason is this. The Supreme Court of California ruled back in May that it was a denial of equal protection for same-sex partners not to be able to be married. That fomented the initiative, and the initiative then was passed by 52% of the population. And here's the constitutional question. Can you change your constitution with an initiative, that's an amendment, or do you, in the case of fundamental rights, have to revise the Constitution? That requires 2/3 vote of the state legislature or a constitutional convention. Those who are against Proposition 8, who want to reverse it, say this is a revision. Those who are for Proposition 8 say no, this is just an amendment, and that's the fight that the Supreme Court is going to have to resolve.
Thankfully, neither I nor you have to do that. Sir, we thank you very much indeed for joining us. Fascinating to hear your thoughts.